Hi and welcome back to my channel. My name is April. I am a singer-songwriter and music teacher, and today we're going to be talking about what the phrase show, don't tell means in songwriting. At its very core, the phrase show, don't tell just means that you are painting a picture for your listener as opposed to just telling them what you're feeling or what you're thinking. Essentially, you just want the listener to be able to imagine the story for themselves as opposed to just telling them everything that you want them to know. I do think that show, don't tell is a really great piece of advice, especially for people who are just getting started and people who tend to write in a very stream of consciousness type of way. Having said that, I don't think it's a good idea to show all the time, because if you're only showing your story, your listener might start to get confused. They might not know what you're actually trying to say or what you're trying to accomplish. I think that you need a balance between showing and telling in your songwriting in order for your listener to really understand what you're trying to tell them about, but still be able to picture and imagine all of those beautiful scenes you've created for them. The difference between a show and a tell is pretty straightforward. A tell is just telling your listener something. It is late winter. I am happy. The car is going fast. His hair is long. Showing, on the other hand, means giving your listener a vivid enough description that they're able to infer all of those original ideas without you actually having to tell them. When you see this sentence, for instance, you don't need to be told that it's late winter. We already know that it's winter because there's snow on the ground, and in most places that have snow only really happens in the winter. And we know that it's been winter for a while because that snow is turning brown on the side of the highway, which is something that happens as cars keep driving by and it becomes muddy. I'm personally of the opinion that showing and telling fall along a bit of a spectrum. So here's my take on what that spectrum might look like. I am sad. This one is a pure tell. You're literally just explaining what you're thinking. This isn't necessarily a bad thing, and sometimes it's useful to just say, I'm sad. But too much of this can cause a listener to get bored. I am crying. In this example, I'm still telling you something frankly, but the pretty obvious subtext is that I am sad. You don't have to be told that I'm sad, because the fact that I'm crying already kind of cleared that up. Level 3 is usually where you'll start to find what we call cliches. These are the bare minimum, very obvious things that would happen when you're describing your tell. When you hear the phrase, tears well up in my eyes, it's safe to assume that it's because you're crying. We can then infer that you're sad. However, there are still way more interesting and unique ways to express that you're crying. Mascara tracks stain my cheeks. Now we're getting somewhere. This not only tells us that we're sad and crying and that tears are falling down our face, but it also gives us more information about our narrator. We know that they're wearing makeup, and this tells us that our character is the type of person who wears makeup sometimes. And I don't know about you, but I don't typically wear mascara unless I'm leaving the house or filming one of these videos. So my guess is that they're probably crying during a time when they weren't expecting to cry, like the middle of the day or around another person or people. Black droplets smudge your cursive. This example gives us all of the information of the previous examples. We're sad, we're crying, tears are falling, we're wearing mascara, but now we have even more context. We learn that our narrator is crying because they're sad while reading this letter or note. And I think this example works. However, this might be the moment that you start to lose some casual listeners. The word droplet, for instance, just feels like it's trying too hard. You could just as easily say tear and our listener wouldn't feel too bad about it. Same thing with cursive. You could just say your note or your letter, or you could say your words or your writing. There are so many different possibilities, and I think the word cursive can feel like a little bit too much. I do think any of these options would work, and I think level 5 in general is great for both really vivid, intense, imagery-focused, analyzable lyrics, but it also works best when paired with something a little less concentrated. For instance, pushing levels 4 and 5 together to create mascara tracks stain my cheeks, the black droplets smudge your cursive. Though personally, I'd just stick with mascara tracks stain my cheeks and smudge your cursive. As I said before, In songwriting, sometimes we need a little bit of telling. Otherwise, we feel unmoored, like we're just swimming in imagery, and we have to listen a few times before we actually start to understand what the artist wants us to hear, or how we decide to interpret it on our own. The common consensus in the songwriting community as a whole is that you should use your verses to show the story, and you should use your chorus to tell. Following this technique means that your listener isn't going to get bored hearing a bunch of tells one after the next, but they're also able to latch on to the main idea, and because the chorus gets repeated so many times throughout the song, it's much easier to figure out what on earth the song is about. It's also worth noting that some shows work better than others. For instance, which one of these two sentences works better in a song? I tied my shoes and walked out the door. Or, I bent down and grabbed my left shoelace in one hand and my right shoelace in the other, and then I crossed one over the other and spun the two ends around each other, creating a loop with one shoelace end. And then I wrapped the other end around the loop, eventually creating a second loop, which resulted in my shoes staying on my feet, before standing up using my hand to push up from the floor, and then put my left hand on the golden doorknob, which I then turned while pushing the door with the weight of my arm. As you can see, sometimes too much showing can be a bad thing. Going overboard with showing can cause your listener to get confused or get bored, and if your listener is smart enough to figure out that hot sand between your toes means walking on a beach, they're also going to be clever enough to figure out what tying your shoes looks like. You should also work to get rid of some of the really obvious imagery. For instance, if you're describing a bedroom, we're going to kind of assume that there's a bed in the room unless we're told otherwise. So you don't need to tell us, it is a room with walls and a door and a bed and a dresser, because we're going to be able to figure all of that out. Those things already fit in our mental picture of what a bedroom looks like, so we don't actually need to hear them reiterated. Instead, think about what makes that bedroom interesting. Is there a colorful pile of dirty clothes in the corner? Or is there a neatly folded stack of black shirts on the bed? Cat hair on the comforter tells you a very different story from vacuum lines in the rug. These images give us a lot of information about both the space and the character, and it means that you don't need to just say, this character is messy, or this character is really neat. Meanwhile, your listener doesn't need you to explain that there is a bed in the bedroom. The last thing I'm going to touch on in this video is how we use and understand specificity in language. Some images and ideas give us an automatic response as listeners. Just from living in the world, we have lots of associations with different words and phrases. For instance, if you describe your main character as wearing Chanel No. 5 and holding a rose, we assume high class, we assume female identifying. We also make assumptions about the fact that they're probably in a very fancy outfit at a very fancy place, or that they're a contestant on The Bachelor. Whether or not these assumptions are true or universal, they're still written into the public consciousness. They're still unconscious things that we sort of bring up in our brains when we hear these specific words. So in your writing, pay attention to those specific details. Notice the things that people are going to associate with other things, or the assumptions that they're going to make based on stereotypes. Now, you can totally use stereotypes to your advantage. For instance, if you're writing a song about a very rigid old woman, you can name her Eleanor Rigby. But if you're writing a song about someone young and beautiful with seashell eyes and a windy smile, you're going to use a young, beautiful sounding name like Julia, which literally has the word jewel in it. When the names of our characters have these qualities that give us these specific associations, we don't actually need to know that much more about our characters. The artist has already given us a lot of information just from the name of the song alone. You can also use these associations in order to break expectations. The song Meet Virginia by Train gives us a lot of conflicting information about our character. We know, for instance, that she wears high heels while she exercises. Not only is this a very weird, bizarre, dangerous activity, but it also tells us a lot about the duality of our character. So let's say, for instance, that you want to write a song about your child's 5th birthday party. And let's say that that birthday party was at Chuck E. Cheese. You can write about this exact same party from so many different angles, and each one is going to give you a different type of song. And it's going to give your listeners different associations. So let's say at this Chuck E. Cheese birthday party, there are 30 kids from your child's class, and they're all eating pizza and playing in the ball pit. If you're writing a comedy song, there is a ton to draw from here. For instance, you definitely want to talk about the fuzzy animatronic rat, but maybe you can also talk about the mysterious stain in the carpet. Maybe an adult is shouting the name Olivia and like 10 heads emerge from the ball pit. But if you want to write a song about the importance of valuing your youth before it's gone, chances are the animatronic rat will not be making an appearance. In this case, I probably wouldn't mention the literal location at all, but just use specific imagery to show the story. Balloons pushing toward the ceiling, the child's face as they blow out the flame. Those sorts of images will resonate with your listener and give the proper tone in order to convey your story in the way that you intend it to be conveyed. I hope you found this video helpful, and if you did, please make sure to leave a like, leave me a comment, subscribe to the channel, and of course ring that little bell to be notified the next time I post.